Welcome to the Dash Mindset Podcast. I'm Sherry Zievenbergen. You were born, you're gonna die, and your adventure is your dash in between. So make the most of it. Unlock your potential in all aspects of your dash by embracing your uniqueness and living in a way that's authentic to you, not by doing more things, but by focusing on the right things. I'm a former corporate leader turned coach who's on my own journey, and I'm passionate about helping you on your journey too. So on the podcast, we'll explore how to live authentically by deciphering who you truly are and what you truly want. Are you ready to take a step toward designing your dash? Someday doesn't actually exist, so let's do it now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dash Mindset Podcast. Today, I have my friend Eric Recker with me again. You might remember Eric from episode 26. If you don't, I encourage you to listen because Eric is just a wonderful human and so inspirational, which you'll pick up on today. So he and I had a conversation in episode 26. There just wasn't enough time. Eric has so much in his life and always has, and we just didn't cover everything. We didn't even cover his book. We didn't cover the fact that he is I'm going to say recovering triathlete because that's how you referred to yourself before, Eric. Although I don't know if you're recovering. You're not recovering well. I'm just going to still call you one. But aside from that, he's a dentist, coach, keynote speaker, workshop facilitator. He wrote a book that I mentioned. And so I want to talk about all those things today and really just cover all the things that we didn't the first time around in episode 26. So thank you for being here, Eric. I'm going to start, Eric, by saying, okay, you just returned from a hike on Monday. Today's Friday. And so I would love to let's talk about that first, Eric. And when I say let's, that means you talk about it because I don't really understand. But you climbed, you hiked, you climbed a mountain several times. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Sherry, thanks so much for having me. I love the energy of our first podcast, and I am very confident that this one might even eclipse that. So I'm super excited about it. So here we go. You know, social media is a funny thing. You see one thing on your social media, and it's dangerous to click on it because you will see that same thing 482,000 times over the next few weeks. So about a year ago, I saw a blurb on 29029 Everesting. And I thought, well, that looks like a mountain. I need to learn more about that. So to break it down to what it actually is, there's a company that rents out a ski lift at a ski resort. They do this 6 different times a year in different locations. And the goal is for you to climb 29,029 feet over a period of 36 hours. So 29,029 is the height of Mount Everest above sea level. So I have no interest in climbing Mount Everest, not even a little bit. Great for people who do. I've seen the pictures. The lines, there's just so many things that are out of our control and ways that bad things can happen there. So I'm not that guy. Now, this is a little bit more calculated and a little bit more protected, but still it is a long, grueling event. So I thought, boy, I better learn more about this. So the one that worked best in my schedule was at a place called Snowbasin Resort. And that happens to be 45 minutes away from a place that we love to stay in Utah called Park City. And so my wife and I first got her okay. That's always one of those things. I have an incredibly supportive wife. Sherry, you've met her before. But
she is wonderful, man, so wonderful.
She puts up with these harebrained things that I want to do. So the gist of it is you hike up, ride a gondola back down, and repeat until you get 29,000 feet. So this particular mountain is 2,300 vertical feet up from the base to the gondola. So I did that 13 times over the time frame of 36 hours. So each time you go, you get to, it's pretty cool. You come back down and they have this branding iron. And they have a board that has 13 vertical boards for 13 vertical squares for each person. So once you hike one, you get the branding iron out and you put the brand. It looks just like a little mountain, and you brand that on the board, and then you go back up and do it again. And then you wear a bib that has all of the tallest mountains on each of the continents on the back. So the shortest of the tallest peaks is Kosciuszko. So you have to hike 4 times to get to the vertical height of Kosciuszko. So then once you've done that, you get a check mark on the back of your bib. So as you're hiking, you can see where other people are on their progress. And it's really neat. Your name is on the back of your bib and the front. So the goal of this, it's all about community. So as I'm walking up behind you and I see you, I can say, Sherry, way to go. I see you got to whatever mountain. Way to go. You got this. You can keep going. So for me, I'm a natural encourager. So this was awesome. So then and then I'd pass them and they'd say, Eric, way to go. Good to see you again, or something like that. So it's just this whole 36 hours of people encouraging each other, helping each other up the mountain. There was no official time, which is amazing. It's either you finish or you don't. And what I found out once I got there is even if you don't get to the top, you get a medal for whichever mountain you got to. So there were people there that their goal was 4 ascents or 8 ascents or 9. Mine was obviously 13, but it was just cool to see people and to hear their stories and to experience all of that. It really was a life-changing event.
So you registered for this event. You paid for it, I'm guessing? So no one paid you to do this. You paid someone else to allow you to climb this mountain 13 times. That is amazing to me. And one thing I want to point out is how I just so I love how different people's interests are. Because I might stop at the mountain to take a picture. I'm sure it was beautiful. I have no doubt it was beautiful, but it would never occur to me to climb it 13 times. And I just love that you are so passionate about that and you follow through and you just do it. And that there are all these other people doing the same thing. And okay, so you mentioned community. So tell me about that, because there were several people choosing to climb this mountain several times. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so there were about 300 people. And here's the crazy thing about it. They put on 6 events, and the event that I signed up for sold out in 12 seconds.
12 seconds?
Yes. So there are a lot of crazy people who want to do that. But what was really cool is I had come up with some time goals. That's the way my brain works. But I was going to try really, really, really hard to not hold too tightly to any outcomes. Because when I've done that in the past, anytime we do that in life, when we hold too rigidly to an outcome, if it doesn't happen, we are just crushed. So I had 3 different times that I thought, okay, if I do 2-hour ascents, this is what it looks like. If I do 1 hour and 45, I do 1 hour and 35, just mentally so I know where I was at as far as the bigger picture, because I wanted to make sure I had time to be comfortable to finish, comfortable to cross the finish, have enough time. So the first ascent I did on my own. The second one, I started hiking with 3 other people. We just naturally had the same pace. And one of those people was a guy named Pete. And I had not met Pete before we found ourselves right next to each other on that mountain hiking. And the other 2 people we were with, we hiked another lap with them, and then they kind of did their own thing. Pete and I stuck together for 11 of the last 12 laps. And like I said, I didn't know this guy at all, but we just hit it off. We started finding out that we had things in common. I learned how he trained and about his life. He learned about my life and what I do. And what was really cool is on hike 4, I got brain fog. And I don't know if you've ever had brain fog, but brain fog is where it's almost like an out-of-body experience. Like you're there and you know you're moving, but there's no clarity. Mm-hmm. And I hate moments of no clarity. It makes sense. I didn't sleep a minute the night before the hike because I just couldn't get my mind to settle down. Here I was, I had 36 hours ahead of me and I was operating on zero sleep. But really what's amazing is our bodies are ridiculously stronger than we think they are. But our minds will tell us all sorts of lies. So what I realized, if I would have been hiking alone without Pete, the brain fog may have done me in because I didn't like it. It was uncomfortable. I didn't feel safe because I didn't know what was going to happen. And so I said, Pete, I'm foggy, man. What do you think? And he said, well, how are you doing with your electrolytes? So I said, well, I think I probably need to crank that up. He's like, all right, well, we're getting 4 summits before lunch. Let's go down. Let's have some lunch. You hit the electrolytes and then we'll get back after it. So because of the community and because Pete did not see me as competition, I did not see Pete as competition. We decided to work together for a common goal. And so he helped me. And later on, when he was struggling, I helped him. And we were able to do that. And you saw so much of that on the mountain. And when somebody was struggling, we could stop and say to them, hey, what do you need? How can we help? And sometimes it's an encouraging word or a prayer or it's something to help them along their journey. And that's what I mean by community. So I have probably 8 or 10 people that I've been texting back and forth with this week, just checking in on their recovery and how they're doing. And so the community is amazing. And the company 29029 really hyped that and said you would be blown away by it. And I was. It was so many lessons. But one of the biggest lessons that I got from the community was we are not meant to hike alone. And in the things we do in this life, we can't be isolated. COVID said, get in your own bubble and stay in your own bubble. People are dangerous. Not a political statement, but we are better together. We can't hike alone. We can't do life alone.
That's amazing. And I especially love the fact that you and Pete didn't know one another and you came together. Obviously, you had a common goal, and I'm sure you know each other very well now. But if you hadn't met Pete, or if you hadn't had a bond with anyone in particular and you had hiked alone, do you think you would have made it, Eric?
I'm not sure. Or if I would have, I would not have had nearly as much fun. And that was one of the things that has been missing from previous events that I did, is I didn't particularly have fun. The training was okay. And then the race did not equal the sacrifice of the training because I didn't enjoy it. This was different. It was hard. There was suffering involved, staring at that mountain, and some of the grades were well over 30%. So just looking at that, and every time talking yourself into the mindset of talking yourself into, okay, I got to do it again. Okay, I got to do it again. And the one that we did at 11:30, when Pete and I talked ourselves into getting number 10 on that first day, it was 11:15. We were sitting outside the recovery lounge. They had a recovery lounge set up with a couple physical therapists, some massage therapists, and then some Normatec boots to try to help people recover a little bit. I wish somebody could have recorded the conversation because I think we were sitting there like slumped down. Hey, Pete, should we get another one? I don't know, Eric. What do you think? Should we get another one? Well, if we get another one, then tomorrow we'll only have 3 left. Okay, let's go. And then we went, and that ended up being our fastest ascent of all 13. And we came back down, hit the showers, laid down, actually got about 2 hours of sleep, got back up, and we were able to do our last 3 and finished in plenty of time and enjoyed the heck out of those last 3 hikes.
So you didn't get any sleep the night before the hike. Then you climbed the mountain 10 times, and then you slept for 2 hours, and then you relatively quickly climbed another 3. You recognize how insane that is, right, Eric?
Well, when you say it like that, it sounds crazy.
And I mean that in a very complimentary way. In fact, when I was at your event, the Win the Now event, and I met your wife, at one point she and I were at the same table, and I think I actually questioned your sanity. I said, so is he borderline crazy, or has he actually crossed the line? But she was just so lovely and obviously so supportive to say, yeah, you go climb that mountain, Eric. So that's fantastic. Okay. So tell me what was going on in your mind so first of all, okay, I'm going to step back. You said that you saw, I think, was it on Facebook that you learned about this event? You said, oh, I need to know more about that. Now, if that ever popped up on my Facebook, which it wouldn't, if it did, it would never occur to me, oh, I need to know more about that. So can you just kind of tell me about your thought process when you signed up for this event, or when you signed up for the Ironman, because you've done double, triple Ironmans, men, right? So tell me about your thought process when it comes to signing up for these events, and what leads you to those events, and then what the outcome of those.
So it's really interesting. Until now, this is the first event I have done that I would consider on a new operating system. So I don't know how much, I'm trying to remember how much we got into this last time, but previously, when I was really young, I was told that I wasn't good enough. And so because of that, everything I had to prove that I was good enough to everyone. So all of the events I did, it was like, oh, maybe I'll be good enough if I do this. Maybe I'll be good enough if I do this. Not like right in the middle of my brain, but it was right in the back of my brain. That voice was always there. And before I did the Leadville mountain bike race in, I believe that's 2017, that's when I had if you don't know why you're climbing the mountain, you won't find the answer at the top. So the biggest thing for me with this, if I was going to do this, if I was going to sign up for this, I had to have an ironclad why. I had to have 100% know why I'm doing this. Because if I don't, there's not going to be any answers at the top. So my mindset on this and my reason for this was, one, I wanted to do something in community. Like I want to experience an event in community where no one is sizing anyone else up. No one is competing with anyone else. We're just have a task in front of us. We all have the same task. And it is either the results are finish all 13, finish some number less than 13, or don't do it at all. That's really what it is. There's no time. The first person who crossed, no one's ever going to know that except for the people who paid close attention to it. So it was doing something in community, but much more, I wanted to learn about my mindset. My goal is to be able to have a keynote based on my experience here and the lessons from climbing the mountain. And the biggest problem I'm going to have is narrowing it down to 3 or 4, because I probably have 100 things that I've learned from this. So my why was mindset, doing something in community, and then having an opportunity to encourage other people along their journey, which I love to do. I knew there would be people here who would need encouragement. But what I really didn't know is how much I would be encouraged by other people, specifically people who had a different goal in this event than what I had. So I think when we sign up for these things, we have to know why we're doing it. You know, some people say, well, I want to, and I ask my young patients this all the time in my dental practice. Where are you going to school? Here's where I'm going. Okay. What are you studying? Well, I'm studying this. What's your ultimate job with that? Well, this is what my ultimate job would be. Well, why do you want that to be your ultimate job? Oh, I don't know. That's what my dad does. Or, oh, I don't know. And I'll say very gently, it would be worth your while to answer that question before you start spending money on it. Because I think we jump into all these things and we don't, and yeah, some of life is just taking a leap. But I think it's super important that we know why we're doing what we're doing in the season. And it might look different. Why I was doing this race now had nothing to do with why I would be doing a race in 2017. So that's kind of a roundabout answer to that, but that's why I chose to jump into it.
I love that, and yeah, it's great to take the leap, but so often we take a leap without having any understanding of why we're doing it. It could be because someone mentioned they thought it was a good idea. I've worked with clients before who have said they wanted to do something just to prove to themselves that they could, and I get that, but I'd say, but why do you want to prove that to yourself? Because then, I mean, what you've experienced in the past too is you accomplish that goal and you move on to the next thing, and you just keep trying to prove to yourself that you can do this thing. But just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should. This time for you, it meant that you should because you understood the why behind it. It makes complete sense. So you had mentioned that in the past, when you've done these events, you were so focused, these are my words, not yours, but basically you were so focused on accomplishing the goal and you were really kind of in it alone. You didn't have that community you did this time. So in the past, Eric, when you've completed events, did you feel like the accomplishment felt as good as you expected? Or did you feel like, okay, did that, and then you were just on to the next mountain?
I am such a slow learner sometimes, Sherry. It just drives me crazy. I'm sure I'm the only one, but boy,
oh yeah, absolutely.
When I crossed those first few triathlon finish lines, and it didn't mean as much as I thought it was going to mean, it would have been great if that was kind of, hey, guess what? But it didn't. And then I crossed the first Ironman finish line that I went across. That one was pretty significant because my wife was there and two of our really good friends were there at the finish line. So that was amazing. Like I got to celebrate that with them and we really enjoyed it. But I was always crossing the finish line with, okay, now what? Okay, now what? Okay, now what? Mm-hmm. And holy crap, an Ironman triathlon, celebrate that. I look back on that like, come on, man, not many people get to do that. Celebrate it. And so I talk to people all the time about this. How are you going to celebrate, but how are you going to celebrate along the way? You just smashed a 22-hour training week, 22 hours, in addition to everything else that you have going on in your life. What are you going to do to mark that? What are you going to do to say, wow, I just did that? Because if you can't celebrate along the way, I mean, you don't have to go on an Alaskan cruise, but go out for ice cream. Have a movie night with your family. Do something to mark, wow, I just did a hard thing. This is amazing. And it will give you energy to keep going for the next thing.
Right. And I'm realizing too, as we're talking about this, that I think so often, and based upon my own experiences in the past, not climbing actual mountains, but I feel like when I've accomplished a particular goal, I didn't have that feeling I expected, or maybe it lasted for such a short amount of time because I didn't allow myself to celebrate, that I immediately thought, oh, I will feel that feeling when I do the next thing. And that's just occurring to me now as we're talking through this. And I think that's probably why in the past I've thought, or partially why I immediately jump to the next thing, is because I don't have that level of celebration I expect. Do you feel like that was maybe the case for you?
Oh, completely. And our American economic machine is built on the next thing.
Right.
You know what? I'll be happy when I get the Mustang convertible. I'll be happy when I get the Wave Runner. I'll be happy when I get this purse. I'll be happy when fill in the blank, whatever it is for you. If you're not happy without it, you're not going to be happy with it. So I think there's probably some people who are on this mountain that were chasing happiness and chasing then what and all of those kind of things. But the ones that I really saw that were really in it, they knew why they were doing it. They knew what they wanted to get out of it. And they knew that this was a tool for the greater enjoyment and fulfillment of life. And so when we can frame things in that context, when we can frame our achievements and accomplishments, I tell you what, had my wife not been there at the finish line to celebrate with me, it would have been a whole lot more hollow. So the really cool story. So two of her friends decided to come out, and they came out and they hiked a little bit in Zion and Arches. And then they drove up and stayed a night with Amy before they came up to meet me. I thought they were just going to be there for the finish line. So Pete and I are hiking up on number 11 of 13. And all of a sudden from the gondola overhead, I heard just as loud as could be, "Get it, get it." And it was our friend Susan. And she's done an Ironman before, and we've gone to support her at some of her events. And she was just yelling from the top of her lungs up there. So I was like, no way. So I got to, before we did our last hike, I got to go through the chute up at the top. I got to give my wife a huge hug, got to give our friends a big hug. And I knew that the next time up, they'd also be waiting for me. So it was so cool. So, knowing why you're doing what you're doing, celebrating along the way, and then doing those things with the people that it matters to you the most with. Oh my gosh. If you can do all those things, then all of a sudden your goals will have color and they will be exciting, and it will be life-changing.
That's amazing. I also love, Eric, that so Amy she has no interest in climbing a mountain 13 times, right? At least I didn't get that sense from her when I was talking to her, for sure.
Right.
But she still supports you in that. And so I love that it's not that you have to do it together, that you have to climb the mountain together, but she's there with you and she's supportive of it. Even if she truly doesn't understand why anyone would climb a mountain 13 times, she still supports you in that. And she's there for you in that. And she's still there in the journey, even though she's not actually climbing the mountain.
I am so fortunate, Sherry. I married way out of my league. My wife is way too good of a person for me. And by the grace of God, we have grown together over our relationship. But she is so supportive of me. She celebrates my accomplishments. She may roll her eyes when I'm not looking from time to time. But I'm so thankful that I get to do all of this with her. Even though she's not on the course with me. I know that she's thinking of me, and she's helped prepare, and she helps with my packing list. And I've written a couple posts about her being my Sherpa. And I had somebody say, well, that's kind of a derogatory thing to say to your wife. And I said, well, what's your relationship like with your wife? Well, she kind of does her thing and I kind of do my thing. I said, the relationship between a climber and their Sherpa is pretty darn close. Like it's necessary for a climber to have someone to support them along the way. And that's what she does. And I only hope my goal is to support her the way that she supports me. And right now, in this next season, these next several months, that's going to involve me not having anything like that on the calendar.
Do you think you will again at some point, Eric, whether it's this mountain or maybe another one? Maybe Everest will be on your list at some point.
So I have a couple things I'm thinking about. Cotopaxi is a mountain in South America, and it's just over 20,000 feet. So I have done Kilimanjaro before, but that was 19,000 and change. This would be over 20, so it'd be kind of neat, I think, to do that. There's a part of me, and I'm not even a week removed from it yet, but there's a part of me who wants to try a different mountain for 29029 because it was just such the community. And I saw the people who had come back that had done one before and the knowledge that they had that they could impart to people who hadn't done one yet. And just the joy in their stories of why they decided to do another one. We'll see. We'll see.
I love that you at least allowed yourself a few days to start thinking about the next mountain. So that's progress, Eric.
It's progress. It's progress. I'm a recovering triathlete, but I'm not sure I'll ever be a recovering mountain climber.
And I also really love that. I mean, you are so encouraging and that you were able to encourage others along the way and then also take from the experience all of your experiences along the way that you can encourage others with. So it's not just that, okay, you're done now. You encouraged everybody to climb the mountain. You're encouraging or continuing to encourage other people to climb their own mountain, whatever that looks like.
Yep. Yeah. It's the bigger picture. It's just being able to see the bigger picture. We were all in this together. And especially, even from the beginning, but especially when I knew that I was going to be able to achieve my goal, that second day, I said, I want to have a ton of fun and I want to encourage as many people as I possibly can. I want to take it in. I want to solidify some of those relationships. I want to let everybody, all the volunteers know how much I appreciate them, all of that kind of stuff. And that's the stuff that creates it is well with my soul when I walk away from the mountain.
I want to point out the fact that you said you want to have a ton of fun, because I think it's so important for people to recognize that we all have fun in different ways. And I think it's so important to incorporate fun throughout our lives, not just, from a personal standpoint, but also from a professional standpoint, from a mountain climbing standpoint, whatever that looks like for you, because there are a lot of people out there who would not consider mountain climbing fun. And there are a lot of people who are. And I think it's so important for people to recognize what's fun to them and incorporate that into their lives and in all aspects of their lives.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Sherry. What looks like fun for me might not be fun for you. What looks like fun for me is not necessarily fun for my wife. But how can we find our own versions of fun? And super importantly, with our significant others and with our friends, how can we find common ground where we can have fun together? So the day after, Amy and I, we went and sat by the pool. And we were in the sun and we were reading and we were talking, and then we'd sit in the pool for a while. Then we do that, and then we just went for a drive, and it was restful, and it was rejuvenating, and it was recharging, and we were together, and it was So people are going to listen to this and be like, "This guy is whack. How is that fun? Like, that is suffering." Yeah, to them maybe, but to me, it truly was fun. And I love to hear other people's things that they do to have fun. Because when we learn from each other like that, maybe something that you do, Sherry, that I never even would have thought of could become the new thing that I do to have fun.
Right. And if it's not, great. I mean, when I say you're an inspiration, Eric, you absolutely are. However, you are not inspiring me to climb a mountain, right? I mean, you're inspiring me in different ways. So, that made me think, I have to say, so adventure is something, that's one of my primary values is adventure, but in a very different way. So I suspect that adventure is one of your values as well, but we each define it very differently. And I think that's something that people need to consider too, is that, I'm not going to put my life at risk. I have a different definition of adventure. But what it made me think of is my husband and I are going on a trip in November, and it's a surprise trip. We have no idea where we're going, Eric. And now I was telling a friend of mine this, and I'm so excited because that is an adventure to me, not knowing where we're going to be dropped off. It's with Wandering Earl Tours. He and I had a discussion in a couple episodes as well. He's amazing, if anyone loves to travel, I highly recommend him. But it's a surprise to her. We don't know where we're going. And I was telling a friend of mine about it, and she said, Kraus, that's my maiden name. She knew me before I was married. She said, Kraus, that sounds terrible.
Right. And it would be terrible to some people. Not knowing would be terrible, but man, letting go of control and just being in the moment and just experiencing whatever it's going to be. That will be amazing.
That's the adventure.
That will be amazing, Carrie. I'm excited for you guys.
Thank you. Yeah. I don't think there are going to be any mountains. There might be, but I'm only climbing once if there is.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to get to, Eric, I want to get to your book because last time we did not talk about your book, The Dam Analogy. We talked a little bit about your line dance and moving to the left and to the right, but could you share with everyone what specifically led you to write the dam analogy and what inspired that?
Yeah, so I live a mile away from Lake Red Rock, Iowa's largest lake. So a lot of times on Sunday mornings, I would ride my bike across the dam. That was just kind of the path I took. I'd go 20 or 30 miles before church, and I'd be out, and that was typically what I would do. Well, I'm riding across one time, and I can't honestly remember exactly when it was, but sometimes you just have this feeling like right in your gut. It's not an audible voice, but you just have words that come that you know are significant. And what I heard is, we are the dam. And I thought, boy, am I off on my electrolytes? What is going on? Like, that's a weird thing to hear. So I finished my bike ride, but the rest of the day, it just wouldn't go away. So I started processing it a little bit and thinking about it. And what I came up with is, we are like a dam. So a dam works. We have a lake on one side. We have a river on the other side. And the dam regulates how the water flows from one side to the other. Like a dam, all we are really doing is controlling the flow of energy through our bodies. And this is not some new age woo-woo type of thing. It really is true. So we are pretty good at the outflow side. We get our stuff done, right? If we have we're likely to get our tasks checked off. Some of them we're going to procrastinate, but we're likely to get our tasks checked off. We're not very good at the inflow side. The inflow side is all of the things that we do to help take care of ourselves, to help move us as the line dance goes. Life takes us to the left over to the 1 on the 1 to 10 scale. We need to figure out ways to move ourselves back to the right. And we're not very good at it. And also what we're really bad at is lying to ourselves. We are liars. So we tell ourselves we're at a 7 or an 8. So 10 is completely full, 1 is completely empty. We tell ourselves we're a 7 or an 8. Guess what? We're really a 2 or a 3. And so we're operating from being really, really empty, but like we're actually full. And so we just keep pouring out, getting more and more empty. And that's where burnout happens, because we are overcommitted. We have too many things on the outflow side, and we are not taking care of ourselves. So that is the nuts and bolts of what the book is about. And then I go into a whole bunch of strategies of how we can work on our inflow, how we can work on our outflow, maybe working on having less unnecessary outflow. And really, ultimately, it's a handbook for how we take care of ourselves, because we have to be a little bit selfish so that we can be selfless. We're meant to impact the world, but we have to take care of ourselves or we have nothing to give.
I love in the book that you kind of treat it as a workbook. You actually have areas in which people can write and make notes to themselves and plan things out. And I just think that is so great, because I have a lot of sticky notes on mine. I just love that people can use this as a reference, and just, it's not something that your expectation is not that someone read it and just retain all of it, but actually use it as a reference and come back to it and say, okay, now what did I say I was going to do? And how am I feeling at this point? And what do I do about it? I think that's fantastic. One other thing I want to mention too, you were talking about how we lie to ourselves. It's so funny, isn't it? We listen to our brains, and it's all, it's not conscious, but we're listening to our brains, and we just treat it like it's the news, like it's true. And not that the news is true either, but anyway, I won't get into all that. But we just think, oh, well, our brain's saying that, it must be right. But so much of what we tell ourselves is not right at all. It's just a protective mechanism, and it's lying to us in order to keep us safe, which is actually preventing us from getting the things we want. So I talk to people a lot about what you said, and the fact that we have to get honest with ourselves, because if you are believing yourself to be at a 7 or 8, and you're probably not even recognizing that because you're just going in life. If you believe yourself to be a 7 or an 8, you can't do anything about it. You can't actually be a 7 or an 8 if you're just telling yourself you are and you aren't. You have to get honest with yourself first, which is what you talk about that in the book too.
Yeah. I love how you put that, because if we don't be honest with ourselves, then what's the point of self-awareness? Because this is basically what I'm challenging people is to be self-aware. Have the courage to be honest with yourself about where you're at. And I love when I do this workshop, because the first thing I do in the workshop is I'll say, all right, 1 to 10, where you at? Just circle it. Take about 5 seconds and circle it. Okay, put your pen down. All right, now let me tell you how I come up with my number. Now I want you to take a couple more minutes, and I want you to circle that on another line, circle your number. Where are you at? So many times people start to realize that. Oh boy, one of my favorite stories is somebody who said they were an 8 on the first time. And then as we're going through it, and I'm talking about, I have some fun stories I share with that. But then he said, oh my gosh, when we got back together as a group, I said, so anybody have some light bulbs come up? And Tyler raises his hand and he goes, oh, Eric, I thought I was an 8. But then I realized, my wife is gone this week, and I'm being Mr. Mom to my kids, and I'm hauling them everywhere, and I'm doing this, and I'm not sleeping particularly well, and all of this. Like, I'm super excited to be here right now, right in this moment. But really, I'm like a 4 or a 5. And I said, how does that frame going into your weekend? He's like, well, I need to not pack my weekend quite so full of stuff. I need to have a little me time so that I can get ready for the next week, or else I'm going to be pretty empty when I go into the week. And we do this all the time to ourselves. We have to start being honest with ourselves and being honest with our spouses as well about where we're at, so that we can have that time if we really need it.
And we usually don't realize it until we are actually at a 2, because that's when we get irritated, exhausted to the point where we really can't do anything. And you talked about that in episode 26 too, about nearly giving up your dental practice and getting sick and all the things that happen when we realize, oh, wait a minute, maybe I am actually burned out. That's when we generally realize it. So I love that you are encouraging people to think about it every morning and think, okay, where am I today? Truly. If I don't lie to myself and I'm really honest about it, where am I today? And what does that mean for me?
Yeah. And here's the thing. This becomes a fun game, because you start interpreting where other people are. So that person that snaps at you, or is chippy with you, or is reactive with you, guess what? Where do you think they are on the scale? How well do you think they're taking care of themselves? And I think if we can actually think that way, we might be a little bit better at giving each other grace when we're not really on. So I think it's important to understand not only where we're at, but where somebody else might be at. If you see that, there's a chance that somebody else is just a dirtbag or a jackwagon. It's totally possible.
Jackwagon. I'm going to incorporate that into my vernacular.
Oh, do it. Definitely. You always feel good when you say it. You say, oh, that person was sure being a jackwagon. And not everybody knows the term, but I'm trying to spread awareness.
They will.
They will. So, but, I do think at the end of the day, we are all trying to do the best we can with what we have. I really do. But we need tools to be able to do better with what we have. Because once we learn these things about ourselves, then we're much more likely to be able to make change. And when we make change in ourselves and we actually get to that 7 and 8 range, boy, we are primed to make an impact in the world when we do that. And I believe that's what we're called to do. So we got to take care of ourselves to get to that level.
So good, Eric. Okay, I am going to ask you one final question. So last time I asked you about, I asked you what you would tell the younger version of yourself. This time, I'm going to ask, what is one takeaway? And I know you have hundreds, if not even more, but what would you say is your primary takeaway from your hike?
Oh boy.
That you'd like to share, yeah.
Yeah, I really think I'm going to just go back to knowing why you're doing what you're doing. I went back to it every single time I went up the mountain. At some point during it, I went back to why am I doing this? When I'm going up a really steep incline and the footing's not real sure. When it's 11:30 at night and I am the most tired that I've ever been in my life, and all I have is my headlamp, the rocks in front of me, and my thoughts. Going back to why. If we don't, I don't think there's anything better other than, faith and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think there's a better practice that we can do in general in our lives than knowing why we're doing what we're doing. It's not something that you can always come up with on your own. That's why we need coaches, why we need therapists, why we need 2 a.m. friends to be able to help us with this. But know why you're doing what you're doing in the season that you're in. It's so critical.
Oh, I love that. And I'm realizing too, you didn't know Pete. When you first went into the hike, you had your why, but when you got to know Pete, he was part of your journey. He probably became part of your why as well. I mean, you couldn't give up on Pete, right? So you have layers of your why. You start with one, but I'm sure you added some layers as you went too.
And this was so cool. So Pete's girlfriend was going to be there about 12:30 on Saturday, and we were on a pace where we could have finished by 11. And Pete said, he said, Eric, just go ahead. It's okay. Like, Pete, dude, we have hiked this much together. I'm not leaving you behind at this point. We're crossing that finish line together. And you could just tell because he felt bad that I was going to slow down and not finish. I said, I don't know about you, Pete, but I'm not going to get a time when I get up there. And I'd rather finish with more people in our cheering section than fewer people in our cheering section. So then his girlfriend got up there, got to meet my wife and her friends, and they were all standing together. And it was just this moment. And afterwards I said, see why I didn't go ahead? He's like, yeah, heck yeah. So it was just, yeah, it's amazing when you rally with someone around a common goal. It's not hard to find a really great friend.
Oh, that's so good. Okay, so Eric, tell everyone where they can find you.
Yeah, so ericrecker.com, that's the easiest place to find me. That's home base for me. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Pretty easy to locate there. And, I'm a hugely relational person. Like I'd love to get to know people. I love the privilege of being led into other people's stories. So I would love to be a part of your story if you want to have a conversation.
That's so great. That's what it's all about, is relationships, right? So thank you so much for being here again, Eric. I so appreciate it. And I'm especially glad that I was able to have this conversation with you just a few days after your hike. That means so much to me. So thank you for that.
I remember when we were talking the first time, you said, well, what should we look at for dates? And we looked at this date and I said, ooh, I'll just be done with my hike. So we might have a couple things to talk about. So I'm glad the timing worked out the way it did.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Eric.
Thank you, Sherry.
Thanks so much for listening to the Dash Mindset Podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player, tell your friends, and leave us a review. Follow me on my social media platforms highlighted in the show notes, and get in touch with me at thedashmindset.com. Share the topics you'd like me to explore in future episodes. Thanks again for listening to the Dash Mindset Podcast. We'll see you next time. Design and differentiate your dash your way and make today amazing.